It seems like yesterday I was here talking about 2021, and now Alli's here. Hi, Alli. How are you?
Hi, Peter. We're closing out. We're closing out, ringing in 2022 to 2023 right now. Wild.
Uh, yeah, it's. I think after in pandemic after pandemic, everything's a dream, and we're kind of in a dream state. It started as a dream state, but now I feel like there's some legs getting underneath, disrupting education in good ways. So, wow. Well, let me start because midway through this story is when I get Alli to help me go beyond the score. So, but yeah, honestly, you were in the springtime when you jumped in. But I was looking back on episodes, and obviously, wherever I post this episode, we throw it out there to the world. We're gonna have a list of all the people who have been on this entire year, hopefully. Maybe two or three posts, but I realized, Alli, my son was actually the third show. Oh my gosh, he's like a senior now, and he was a junior then. Wow,
Wow.
that's perspective for me. But as I went through, there was a lot of younger folks, and I say younger folks, but I'm old, so that's pretty much everybody else, except for your. I think your grandpa. He's awesome, so he wins. One of my the best fan of 2022. I'm going to go ahead and give him that. So,
Thanks, Grandpa.
like, hey, but we went through a lot. I mean, there was there were a lot of connecting academia and reality, some educator agency. The supply and demand came up of educators a lot. I'm actually reading through my notes because it's so much. I had
Mm.
teacher observations coming up. Wow, job shadowing, new teachers, and different things like that. But I think, it kind of started the overall 2022. I'm going to say it's the title of your episode, Alli. It was, take the leap to fail forward. And that was kind of, teaching, leaping out of airplanes, taking risks. And everybody we talked to this year is taking risks. And then basically, when did we start this series? There's so many people who did some amazing things, but I think it was on my birthday.
It's
Yeah,
wild.
my birthday, we
About
dropped the
all of
first
us.
episode. Yeah, my 50th
Uh,
birthday.
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that like even before we started this series and you got yourself a co-host and then title, I didn't even realize that the title of my episode was well before I ever started jumping out of planes. Take the chance to like leap or fit forward. That's incredible. I think it's like this odd like kind of presence that got put over the podcast for 2022, but it certainly has changed, it seems like. And when you're talking about like this dream state
Hmm.
from the beginning and the pandemic kind of swirling timelines, I feel like who I was at the beginning of 2022 to now is like so different. And it kind of speaks to the evolution of the podcast too,
Right.
that we kind of found each other in that like that weaving of I just feels like a big change period, like new gates are open and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think what intrigued me is, and actually, yeah, I guess when we recorded, you were talking about taking a different angle and stepping out of the classroom and going down that path, and as well as something that has always intrigued me and still does, yet we're kind of in different areas when it comes to changing education, but the mission is the same. So what intrigued me, and I know a lot of listeners were like, okay, how do we make this transition out in from the classroom, out of the classroom, and still help and still continue our why? There's a lot of ed tech talk. There are a lot of coaching talks. There's a lot of all these different areas. And then also, lenses where, people are still doing things in the classrooms and in different cultures of education, whether it's a public, private, micro school, all these different areas as well. I think we're, I mean, that's what really intrigued me was trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? Where is it going to go? What's the storylines behind it? And well, you just started jumping out of planes.
Just
But
dropped into this podcast.
right, yeah, right. However, it is interesting because I do know there have been people in my network and who have been on the podcast who have left and then actually came back. The ed tech bubble burst a little bit, which I kind of thought it would, as everybody rushed to it. When you have something where, oh my gosh, change is happening, good and bad. A lot of people are growing, and I think that's what the interesting part of this whole year was growth. We grew +1 on the podcast, and but also I think it's just learning how to grow through a very difficult, interesting, weird time. I don't know. Every emotion hits out of a pandemic, and I'm so grateful that this entire year has happened, because let's be honest here, right? So there's a lot of us felt stuck right after the pandemic, and a lot of good ideas were implemented and then shut down. And then there's a lot of good ideas that were not so much shut down or are beginning to open up. So tell us, yeah. So that was April. Let's start with you, right? Like that was April when we did our podcast. Were you still in the classroom then? Was that when we recorded?
Yeah, I feel like we should rewind it a bit for our listeners here of how like, give them a little behind the scenes.
Yeah.
How did this whole series happen? Um, and I think it'll help for a lot of our listeners who, right, you're talking about all these changes and growth and like we just don't know where people are, where they want to go, but like to encourage you that you just really don't know like where your next step is going to take you. And Peter and I connected on LinkedIn, like a blind connection.
Yeah.
I just literally sent the connection request and was like, "Hey Peter, your work looks cool." And this was in January actually of 2022 when we
Wow.
connected. And for some kind of reason we messaged. I was like, "Hey, your podcast looks cool. Let's do an episode." You were like, "Yeah, I'm kind of booked through." I think you said for
Yeah.
2 months, and I was like, "Okay." Like, okay, big deal podcast. And so we recorded it in April. Um, and it was really cool. And I love that you do this. You always talk with guests after you're like, look, if there's any way I can help you or assist you. You do this with students. You're such a great networker. Uh, is you actually introduced me to the Beyond Multiple Choice organization with
Yep.
Christine Hadid and the people over there. And I actually was a presenter for them now multiple times. And we then, after that conversation, reached back out to you and was like, "Hey, what do you think about all these ideas behind going beyond multiple choice, going beyond a score? I'd love to talk with you about it." And that was the whole impetus for our series, because that was in June.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were like, "Hey, it's the summer." I remember you being like, I have some like space to think and create." We just kind of like came up with like what was supposed to be like a 4-part series.
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah.
And we just kept extending it and extending it and extending it. And now it's December, end of the year.
Yep.
January is upon us when this episode will come out of a whole new year.
Yeah.
Wild.
Well, I think that's wow, that's interesting. Now, like I have to grasp in my head that you have over what 100 jumps now. Is that right? Is that right?
Yes.
And you weren't
Yes.
that blows my
That's
mind.
right. In
Like,
July.
yeah,
That literally like coalesces with when we started recording podcasting.
yeah.
That whole journey. And that was after the transitioning out of the classroom.
Hmm.
And it was summertime, and that's when I'd signed up for the class, and I just fell in love with it. I mean, not initially.
Hmm.
If you go back and you hear about like the like fear that I felt and everything from it, but it's kind of like taking the leap to fail forward, which was the original episode title that I was on.
Hmm.
It has been like a whole theme, I think, of, well, you just with the podcast, like, I don't know if it's like some just anchor title, but then of my own life. And I think it speaks to what we're doing here on the Disrupt Education podcast, which is to just take the leap. Like,
Hmm.
there's so much good in education. There's so many stories that aren't being told. And this is a wonderful platform that you created, that I get to be a part of, to share those stories and to kind of talk about how education can look differently. And it's just, I keep using the word wild because my brain is having a hard time comprehend like how how much this series just kind of like grew so naturally because there was such a need for it. Like, this
Yeah.
conversation, these types of conversations are needed. There's so many people who want to be part of it, and want to like have a space to have disruptive conversations, because it's not super normal. Like, I mean, when I was in the classroom, like, right, like, you might have like a little back and forth with your colleague, by the water cooler, behind closed doors. But this is like very open doors.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's awesome that you still teach and like and feel like empowered to have these conversations. And we have lots of teachers who are still in the classroom who really do share like awesome stories that they're doing their part. And then people outside of the classroom and different companies and
Hmm.
different organizations who are trying to do things differently. And there's a lot of power in that network.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power in that network. It's been really cool to see and meet so many people. I can see why you love it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. And wow, I'm humbled as I think about it. This is actually going into the fifth year of this podcast, which started out as a YouTube channel, and I just posted the middle of December here that the first one. I just got tired, right? I think I just got tired of people saying we need to change education, we need to change education. So I just started asking the client. That's in my instance the client, which was the high school student, right?
Yep.
Which we've dug into, elementary and post secondary and different things like that. So it is very interesting. And I think one thing that I don't think I've ever explained that as we were talking about going into 2023, into the fifth year of the podcast. And it's what you have brought is such a good lens is that, as a sole person, when you're creating a podcast, you kind of, that you have these guests and you ask them the questions, and but that different perspective, even in off camera conversations, we were talking about marketing and everything. We talked about the logo. I don't think a lot of people know, or even I don't think I've ever told people that logo. Now, I'm not going to say the individual who did it because I want to protect his innocence, but he was a student. Now he's well into his 20s and in his professional life, which does actually require some secrecy. But it was a high school student, or just out, I think he was just out of high school doing some work in the arts field and desktop publishing, and he was teaching himself Photoshop, and he drew it out. And that's actually the second rendition. There is a first rendition of it, and it was all about how he loved graffiti. And he was like, there's a story in graffiti that not a lot of people know or aren't heard. And, there's some damaging graffiti out there. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the storytelling graffiti, and the artist behind it. And I was like hooked. I was like, create it. Let's go. And this young man did a lot of my graphics and actually did some editing and camera work way early, when I was solely a YouTube channel. So to me, that was very humbling. I would never have thought to tell people that without like somebody like you, Alli. So I appreciate that. But I wanted
It's
like,
really
yeah,
cool.
the listeners to know that, right?
Well, and the I think a piece that is really special about the logo for Disrupt is that you wanted it to come from kind of like an underground, movement, and graffiti art kind of speaks to that Renaissance feel, and it is its own artwork. And it's like I saw the logo differently when you were
Hmm.
sharing that, and I'm like, it's so cool. We are changing, we're gonna
Yep.
update some things, but that is definitely staying because I think it's so special where it came from. And uh, it's just like one of those things because full disclosure here, I was like, Peter, let's just like totally change the logo. And you're like, we can't do that. Why not? So that we're not changing it because,
We can
well,
alter it though. That's I think we're going to alter
exactly.
it a little bit. Yeah, I think it's interesting because when we
Modify.
talk about the education system, right? Like, well, do we change the entire thing? Do we want to? Is there some pieces and stories that we need to keep? And it's this whole conversation just kind of blew my mind because I'm thinking after I told you that I'm like, well, maybe it does need changed, or maybe we do need to. But I think, and I think listeners, what we're talking about here is actually the entire podcast is about changing and morphing into something newer and better, yet still keeping some culture, some tradition, some whatever. And it's hard. Like it's hard even thinking about that when we do it. And I just think that story just is all going into the fifth year of the podcast. That's exactly where we should be, right? We should be having these difficult conversations because for me, I was just like in my head, I'm like, well, what does she mean? Why would we change this? And then I'm thinking as I parallel it to an educator, an administrator, a lawmaker, I'm like, oh,
Well done. Well done.
yeah,
See the parallels. But that's honestly, I think that's the beauty of these episodes and the podcast space in that you can have these really kind of divergent, but yet they aren't divergent parallels. They're like they seem like they're going in different directions, but it's like, no, actually, that is an issue that is like a micro scale version of like things we have to shed in education in order to
hmm,
move forward. Like we have to be willing to let go of things that are no longer serving us in order to like let in something new. Now, the logo probably still serves a purpose, but it speaks to like a bigger issue or kind of
hmm,
mindset and area that we like to discuss here on the podcast. So
absolutely.
what a whole year.
You know, I think last year, and I think on the YouTube channel, I have it. It might not still be there now, but it was the end of 2021, and I just remember like doing that, and I was solo when I did the recap, and I felt like I just got out of a heavyweight fight. It wasn't like a bad thing. It was just like, oh my gosh, what the hell just happened that year? And now what's interesting is this year is we're going to be kind of slicing it up a little bit, and there are some things that are happening. But I wanted to kind of talk about one billboard this morning I saw going into school. So obviously I'm in Chicago area, so there's billboards everywhere. And as I was driving into school, there was a university that had a billboard up. I won't tell what university it is, but it was here in Illinois, and it said something to the effect of, "We are the highest rated job placement university in Illinois," and trust me, it wasn't one of the big ones. So I was like, 2022, there it is, right? Like that's the change that's happening. There's competition out there. There's articles and things coming out. I mean, I'm not only working now, and this is just kind of a little coming up, but I'm not only working with local businesses now, I'm working with major corporations as a high school business teacher. there's more to come in 2023, but I think that is one of the most amazing things when you see the university system start to change. I see a huge glimmer of hope because now because that's what we do in high school, right? We basically prepare kids to go to college. Well, that's what we did. And that's starting to change because that landscape is looking different. I'm very excited about that.
It's very exciting. And I just know that it's in our, I don't want to say small way because this podcast is growing continually, but it's one of the places where people can hear that this is where it's shifting and this is where it's going. And so you said something right before we started this episode, and kind of I think it lends itself to like where we're going for 2023. And so uh I wrote it down because I was like, I don't want to mess this up. Okay. So for Disrupt Education, you know, Peter and I have had, and full disclosure, we have a lot of conversations that aren't on camera about like, you know, our hopes, dreams, aspirations, and like it's like we're doing our own planning for the people of the Disrupt Education podcast and where it's going to go. But so we've thought really, really long and hard about this, and we really want to amplify the good pieces in education in and out of the system.
Mm-hmm.
We want to share those stories and facilitate those discussions and have this be a space where we can have those disruptive conversations, but we can really amplify the good pieces. So that's where we're headed. Are you excited?
I am because it is needed. There's so many pockets of amazing people out there. And, you know, one of the things that I like to do, even in my office here, is like right over my shoulder, I'm putting, if those peeps can see, I put a lot of different books out there, and I hopefully, you know, collect some more around education and different things that are out there. But just to get this community going together to just amplify good things inside. But here's the other thing is, and this is why I love your journey, Alli, is everybody needs inside the system and outside the system. And, you know, in order to make this happen on a bigger scale, I think it is a demanding, tough challenge. Even though, you know, we've spoken to superintendents, we've spoken to lawmakers, leaders of state education reforms, and all these different things. But amplifying, I think the thing that we've all heard, and especially in this series that we've been working on, Alli, is it's small pieces that just get louder and louder and louder, and I'm very excited to see where this takes us in 2023. I just rhymed there. I'm very excited to see where this takes us in 2023. It's awesome.
Perfect.
So, final thoughts on closing out 2022.
So I think I'll end with this, is that things said carry weight. If we had only known when we met last year that everything that was going to happen, we wouldn't even believe it. But right, we took the leap to fail forward. Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, I couldn't even anticipated that title and where it would have ended us up. So I'm just excited for my second year in podcasting, and just honored to be here and ready for more jumping out of planes and more podcasting with Peter.
There we go. And then where else? I mean, there's a lot of different things that we'll be working on together, I am sure. Well, for Alli, everybody, thank you so much for a wonderful 2022. We've won a few awards. I'll list those in the comments. We have crossed over a couple of huge numbers in downloads, and just everybody. We're blessed to have you as listeners. Hopefully you have a wonderful ending to your 2022, and we will see you in 2023.